last week whether we covered sex-linked traits. We did. Then we went on to do his pedigree. Yeah? I don't remember it. The idea is to start this. Practice makes progress. And this probably where I left off. Okay, this morning we're going to do a few things. First one, we're going to close off sex-linked traits. Then we will talk about variation. Last part, I'll see if there's time. If there's time, then we will start the next chapter. Okay, for start this morning, may I get everyone to go to part 4 of B part 4. Okay, may I get you this morning to try out the questions? Okay, I will only like you to do up to question 2. Okay, do not need to submit question 3. Question 3, once you draw a genetic diagram, we draw quite a lot already. You take this morning to warm up, do up to question 2. As you're doing question 2, first question you ask yourself is, when you look at this pedigree, can you tell if it's sex-linked or not? Okay? Because you go down the wrong path, then your subsequent questions will all be wrong. So how do you tell? Go through your questions. Okay, class, just a reminder to get this done by next week. Yeah, your one and only homework every term. This is your submission score. So far, so good. Yeah, it's very easy for me. I just give you all full marks every term. Okay, so make sure you get this done. I know I asked for it for next Monday, but you all have your steam maker pen and prepared for. So can you give it to me next Thursday? Okay, the first lesson. So next Thursday, but you're not have any homework writing days. Okay, let's go through the questions. You've been provided a pedigree. A pedigree is a family tree. So look at this pedigree. First and foremost, you have to determine whether it's sex-linked or non-sex linked, because that will affect what kind of symbols you're going to write later on. So who says this is sex-linked? Non-sex linked? Okay, then if I ask you a question, how do you know? Oh, your reply. Sorry, the girl? Female. Oh, okay, what about the female? Okay, female is a disease. It really depends on where it's linked to. If it's linked to the X chromosome versus linked to the Y chromosome, it could affect which gender will have it. But does not mean that if it's linked to the X chromosome that you do not find females with it. It's just that it's a lower probability. So for example, if the female has two X chromosomes and both of them have the recessive allele, possible for females to have it. Yeah? It's just that chances of female having it, probability is lower because it can be masked. So having a female there with the disease is not the clearest sign that it is not sex-linked. It has to do with the proportions. If you find this whole pedigree, both male and female almost have the same chance of having the disease. If you don't know if something is sex-linked, you'll find that really a lot of one gender will have the disease. Then you know it's linked to gender also. But here it's not really linked. Okay? With that knowledge, then we will be able to know how we can solve the rest of the question. The question asks, Is this disease causing allele dominant or recessive? Explain using information figure 0.1. When they say using information figure 0.1, it means that they want you to refer to the numbers. So provided a lot of numbers, which individuals do you pick to help justify whether it's recessive or dominant? To me, there is one couple that is the best to pick. Because that couple has children, that would imply that the disease is recessive. Okay, let's have a look at your friends' responses, which couple they chose. Okay, if we look across the board, a lot of us deem the disease to be recessive. It is recessive, it is recessive, it is recessive. Okay, so that's a good start. We identify it as recessive. But what evidence do we use? You will see that as we scan across the board, many of us identify 7 and 8 as individuals we want to pay attention to. Right? Individuals 7 and 8, individuals 7 and 8, so on and so forth. Okay, individuals 7 and 8. Let's look at Cinci's response then. Cinci says the allele is recessive because if you look at parents 7 and 8, they are not affected, but have affected child. That's a very interesting observation of the phenotype. This shows that parents 7 and 8 will each have a copy of the disease-causing allele, but they were not affected. And child 12 will have 2 copies of the recessive allele, causing him to be affected. I think this is getting there. So when you explain yourself, make sure you cover 2 things. First one is mention observations of the phenotype, which is what Cici did. She said that she observed 7 and 8 not affected, but the child is affected. Okay, observe the phenotype. You must write down what the phenotype is, what you observe. Second, then you make conclusions of the genotype, which is what Cici is trying to do. So if you look up there, she says, therefore, 7 and 8, okay, this was 7 and 8, these are the parents. Then we find that there was one child with the disease. I can't remember which child, which gender. She says, she claims that therefore, both parents 7 and 8 must each have a copy of the disease causing allele. But they were not affected. The child has 2 copies, RR. Okay, getting there. So she has explained the genotype, but just a little bit more and this answer will be complete. Explain therefore, then how is it possible that the parents have no disease? How come they are not affected? Even though since you claim that they both should have 1 copy of the recessive allele, since the child has 2 copies. So how will you explain why the parent does not have the disease, even though they have 1 copy? Okay, yeah, and that makes it complete. Therefore, they confirm must have 1 dominant allele each. Yeah, the fact that they have a dominant allele each allows them to be not affected. Okay, now we can go 1 step further. So, then in the scenario the disease is a dominant allele, could this still hold? Would the parents still be not affected if it's really a dominant allele? Okay? It wouldn't. Because if we claim that the disease is dominant instead, then the parents would have the disease already. Okay? So if you look at the suggested answer, it goes something along the lines of what Cici said. Number 1 is recessive. Next, we made a statement of the phenotype. Individual 12 is affected. So it must have inherited 1 copy of each allele of the recessive one from 7 and 8. So talk about the genotype things. Next, since individuals 7 and 8 must carry 1 copy of the allele, so we're talking about the genotype, and are phenotypically normal, the phenotype, the allele is recessive. Last statement is just to seal the deal. If the allele were dominant, then at least 1 parent should be affected. Okay, just to let you know, most questions have this answer. Okay? Really, I say again, most questions have this template answer. It is a matter of just choosing which individuals you will use in your answer. You know what will change? What will change is the individual. 7, 8, 12. So if you were to encounter a question like that, again a pedigree, they ask you if it's the recessive or the dominant causing allele. Go and look for the relevant individuals. Go and find that couple that are both okay, and then one of them have the children that's not okay. And you just substitute in the correct numbers. You should get the correct answer. Okay, this is a very typical way we can justify whether it's recessive or dominant. From my experience, most of the time it's recessive also. Okay, so if you find it difficult to explain yourself, this is a suggested answer that you can really just take reference. If you want, you can even screenshot this, paste it somewhere in your notes. It's a very good way to justify whether it's recessive or dominant. I like statement 4 the most because statement 4 really seals the deal. Okay? It covers bases. Next question, they say state the probability that individual 6 is homozygous for the hexa gene. So let's look at individual 6 here. Okay, so we look at individual 6 up. Maybe let's look at everyone's responses first. Okay, Ella says unaffected. Therefore, probability is 0%. If says cannot be homozygous. Okay, but they want a probability, so you have to reply with probability. 0% by Kai. So that says 50%. Okay, then 0%, 0%, 25%. Okay, lots of zeros, some 50, some 25. Which means it's 100%. Okay, so how do we solve this question? We need to refer to the pedigree. Okay, they want to know individual 6. To solve this puzzle, we need to figure out what the genotypes of the parents are. So let's look at the parents first. Father, mother. Mother is a disease, and then we want to find out what the genotype of individual 6 is. The genotype of individual 6, okay, we know for a fact this is not affected. Right? What does this imply about the genotype? Not affected, huh? What does this imply about the genotype? What can we be very sure of? What kind of allele will confirm have? Confirm will have one copy of the dominant allele, right? The real question mark here is whether this is dominant or recessive. Yeah? But the question here is asking you, what is the probability that this individual is both dominant? Okay? So what is the probability? We're not sure. That's what we're going to find out. But to find that out, we need to look at parents. What is the genotype of mom? We can be very certain what the genotype is, right? Confirm recessive. Okay, the question mark here is on the father. Is the father, what is the genotype of the father? What can we be very certain of again? About the alleles. Confirm will have one dominant allele, right? That's what we are most certain of. Now the question mark is here. Will it be a small r or big R? What do you think? Small or big? And why? Big. Okay, if we claim that it is both dominant, homozygous dominant, then we look at the offspring. Okay, the offspring, this one is affected, this one is not affected. With such a genotype, is it possible to get these offspring? How are you thinking? Alright. So if you just do a quick Punnett square, you'll find that all of the children should be healthy. But that's not what we see. So we know for a fact this individual homozygous recessive. One must have come from mom, the other one must have come from dad. So that's why we can fill in the blanks. Okay? So now, what's the probability that individual 6 has this particular genotype? So let's do a Punnett square. Small r. So we have an individual that is not affected, another individual that's not affected. We can also have individuals that are affected. So there is a 50% chance that the individual is affected. There's also a 50% chance that the individual is not affected. The question is asking you, what's the probability that this individual who is not affected has this particular genotype? But actually, it's not even possible to get a genotype. Yeah? Both, as long as you are not affected, you will definitely be heterozygous. So the probability was 0%. Yes?
But isn't it like if males have one the disease, then they will?
Yes, but we agreed from the start that this is not sex linked. Yeah? If it is sex linked, then you're right. It is possible that the individual may have the disease. So for example, but anyway, how young? This is a female.
I mean like at the start.
Okay. So at the start. So how you say at the start, fair enough. It could have been, but even if it's at the start, this person doesn't have the disease, right? So most likely it would be like that. Yeah. So even if it was sex linked, it wouldn't hold up this argument. Okay, understand how to do this question? Okay, let's go to the next one. Part C. What is the probability that the next child of 7 and 8 is a girl who is affected by the disease? Okay, let's look at 7 and 8. So, what is the genotype of 7 and 8? The genotype of 7 and 8 would be heterozygous, because we already agreed from long ago, because we noticed that the offspring, one of them has a disease. So that means to say parents definitely heterozygous. So they're asking you what's the probability that the next child will be a girl and is affected. How do we do this question? First and foremost, we need to draw a Punnett square to find out what the genotypes of all the offsprings may be. So we have offsprings like that. What's the probability of getting the disease? 25% chance. Or in other words, 1/4 chance. What's the probability that an individual will be a girl? 50% chance. So if you multiply these together, it's 1/8. 1/8 is 0.125. Okay, so that would be the probability. Okay. Or in other words, 12.5%. Okay, so we are at the end of the segment of puzzle solving. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I want to show you that it's really not about memory work. It's really about using your understanding and concepts to be able to solve puzzles. So if you enjoy solving these puzzles, don't be afraid when you see a pedigree or see such question. Instead, embrace it. Know that you can get it right. It is about using your puzzle solving skills. And so far, you have been quite good at solving the puzzles. Okay, I take a short pause here to take any questions that you may have before we go to the very, very last segment of our chapter. Then we will go to the last chapter of your biology life in JH. Can you give me some time to post some questions for me? Or just ask it up front also over that. Music. ever watched this movie before? I love it. I will watch it anyway. Yeah, no questions? Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next one. Why do I feel I started this with you? I didn't. Right now, we're going to close off the chapter. Variation. Okay, let's do a simple exercise. I'm going to try to plot some data of our class. I'm going to find out how many of us have blood type A, B, AB, O. Okay, this one is the scale of numbers. Okay, how many of us? Okay, how many of us blood type A? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 here. Blood type B? 1, 2, 3. That's all? Okay. Blood type B around 3. Blood type AB? 1, 2. Blood type O? Some of you never raised hand, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6. Okay, our class does not fit the normal distribution that you normally find. Blood type O normally is the one that dominates the most. Yeah. If you look at normal, if you combine your class and my O2 and maybe combine the whole cohort, usually what you find is blood type O will be the highest. Okay, that's fine. We look at our class, for example. We just look at blood types as a trait. Okay, blood types as a trait. You find that we fall into 4 distinct categories of traits, right? Either A, B, AB, or O. What changes is how many of us fall in this particular blood type. Yeah. Other characteristics that fall into distinct categories. For example, you try this. You go and create like a bird shape of your hand, then you pinch down. How many of you have this tendon here? Yeah? Okay, some of you won't have it. So far, I've not really found anyone that don't have it. Anyone? Don't have? O2, I found someone. Wow, finally. Okay, look at Siqi. She doesn't have that tendon. Right? Why all of us have it? Siqi, you sure you don't have? Siqi doesn't have it. Yeah? So, this is another trait you can find in your body that kind of runs on this dominant recessiveness, and also you find very distinct categories. It's either we have it or don't have it. If I were to draw a graph for that particular trait, it's just one times Siqi, then the rest of us are here. Okay, very distinct categories. Others, you look at your earlobes. How many of you, right, have an extra flap? Your ear and this flap coming out. Then some of you just connected to the head. Who are the flappy ones? Okay, your flappy ones. Who doesn't have a flap? Your ear just connects to your. Okay. Hey, are you all surprised? Go and look at each other's ear now. Then you realize, hey, not all our body parts are the same. Your ear doesn't have kind of just blends into your ear. Anyone else? Okay, a lot of us have the earlobe. Okay. Also, just 2 distinct categories of traits. However, if we were to look at a trait of height, okay, we look at height. Yeah, all of our heights are likely very different. Yeah, I can bet that none of our heights are exactly the same. Yeah, there is a very. Why are you laughing?
The same.
Oh, who's the same height? You and Tao, yeah? Exactly the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but if we do look at our entire class, very likely we don't have very distinct categories. It's not like if I ask you to sort yourself into buckets, two categories of height, right? That some of half the class is all 150, then the other half all 150, all 170, right? We don't fall into distinct categories. Instead, we exhibit a kind of continuous kind of variation. And you often find with such variation, I end up having sort of like a bell curve. A lot of us fall within this middle region. Some of us fall in the extremes. For this our class, How Young and Henry likely fit here. And this side then, you all know yourselves. Yeah, no need to highlight. Yeah, so we fall in this range, but a lot of us will fall in this part of the region, right? We call such forms of variation continuous variation. Because we find that how this trait varies, it varies continuously. There is no distinct category. Instead, if I were to flip the other side, this is what I will call discontinuous variation. All of the genetic diagrams, puzzles we've been solving so far fall under this bucket of variation. Yeah? We cannot solve genetic puzzles regarding this. Because if I were to ask you, this individual and this individual, this one the height was 170, this one height 150. You tell me this child, what will be the height? You hope you wish that it will be 170. But chances are, it will be somewhere in between. And we really don't know what the outcome will be. We cannot solve genetic diagrams or puzzles related to continuous variation. So what we've been working on so far, we've really been looking at traits that exhibit this continuous variation because it's easier to solve such puzzles. We can say for certain whether you're going to be this, or this. Okay? Oh yeah?
But don't like children normally outgrow their height.
Oh, but for many factors, because adults we shrink over the years. Yeah? We shrink. Our muscles start to weaken, our bones start to become weakened also. Over the years, really people shrink. If your grandparents were as your grandparents, right? Go ask them what their original height was, right? It wasn't what they are right now. People shrink. So over the years, right, I'm getting taller and taller compared to my father because he's shrinking, not because I'm growing taller. But also because I'm growing taller. Okay? So we look at the traits we've been looking at so far, really, it exhibits a kind of discontinuous variation. So today I'm really just introducing to you two new terms. Discontinuous variation and continuous variation. Your skill to pick up here is to be able to differentiate whether this particular trait exhibits either variation or not. So for example, rather than I ask you whether a particular trait will fit under each category, maybe you tell me, what traits do you think fit under continuous variation? Other than height? Come, let's shout. Other than height? Weight? Okay. Weight definitely exhibits a sort of continuous variation. Anything else? Skin color? That's the color of your skin. Anything else? IQ. Yeah, anything else? No more? Okay, maybe one more. Anything else that exhibits continuous variation that you notice among all of us? It's not this or that, it is really just a range of traits. Head. What about head? The length. Oh, the type. The thickness. Okay, hair type. I am not sure whether it is continuous or discontinuous. Is eyesight? Oh, okay. What about eyesight? It's not possible. I suspect it's possible because I don't know. I don't really notice whether we are this or that. We really have a range. Head height is interesting. So I'm not sure. Because I'm not sure if there is a gene that determines whether curly or not curly. Yeah? If that's what you're talking about, right? If you're talking about hair length, I think this one also quite a large range. Okay, let's go to this one. What about discontinuous variation? What other traits you can think of in your body that exhibits either this or that? Oh, okay. Single double eyelid. Could that be discontinuous? Yeah, I am not sure. But for now, if we look at this particular trait, it would seem to be so. It seems like we are either this or that. Shreya, what are you trying to do? Force out another eyelid. Okay. Anything else? Let me see. I think there were some traits. Yesterday I was looking up, very curious. So human traits, discontinuous variation. Yesterday I saw up a table. Example. Okay, tongue rolling. How many of you can roll your tongue? Who cannot roll tongue? Okay. My wife cannot roll tongue. Her tongue too short. All the time I knew her, right? I always thought that she is, kidding with me when she says she cannot stick out her tongue. Because when when we stick out our tongue, right? I stick out my tongue, this like that. Then when she stick out her tongue, right? This is as far as it goes, her tongue just goes like that. Yeah, I thought she's bluffing me, I'm like, can you stick out your tongue properly? Stop playing your food. Then she said, no, this is really hard, I can stick it out. Then she, that's how I go. Doesn't go past the lips, So I don't believe. I tried to pull one day, right? Really? It really is that short. Yeah. So with that tongue, she cannot do much with it. Cannot roll also. Okay. Eye color, blood groups. Another one. How many of you have dimples in your smile? Hey, look at Jeanette. Jeanette, you have dimples. Yeah, those dimples here look like dimples. Yeah. Who has dimples? Do you know what dimples are? You have dimples? It looks like it's about to come out. Okay? So, there are traits in our body that exhibit this continuous variation. Then there are those that are continuous. Your task are usually, for example, if I show you a question in the SLS, is to be able to differentiate between the two. Yes?
It's like interest linked.
Okay, it's interest linked with genes. So how you ask, what about your interest? So for example, can you give me an example? What do you mean?
Like some people are more interested in like art, some people are more interested in like science.
Okay, could it be? Okay, personally I think most things are governed by our genes. But some are influenced by our environment. So I think it is a play of both. You could have the predisposition, maybe your hand-eye coordination is very good. You can differentiate colors very well. That predisposes you to perhaps like the arts a little bit more. But if you've never been exposed to it, or no one nurtured you, or if your art teacher sucks, right? And after that, always say bad things about you, you also don't like art. So I think it's a play of both. Some other interesting things about this continuous and continuous variation. I think one important thing to think of is this. When we look at this continuous variation, very often we are just looking at single or a few genes. For example, when we look at blood types, we are just only looking at one gene. One gene with 3 alleles. Therefore, the traits are very distinct. When we look at continuous variation, very often the one trait is governed by many genes. What do I mean by that? Okay? Many genes. For example, if we look at height, in truth, for you to be tall, many genes will have to fall into place for you to be tall. For example, if you want to be tall, your bones need to be strong. For you to be tall, your muscles also need to be strong. For you to be tall, something to do with your blood also. Your blood pressure better be good enough to sustain that height. Okay? For you to be tall, perhaps, what else do you need? Okay, I'll just stop here first. Bone, muscle, and blood group. Many genes are probably required for you to achieve that height. Each of the gene, right, has its own characteristics of how it's going to function. So imagine this now. If you want someone who's really, really, really tall, you will probably require the genotype to look something like that. Assuming the dominant one governs the one that will allow you to be tall. Yeah. Okay, this one is going to be a basketball prodigy already. But then, on the flip side, if you are someone who gets all of the recessive one, then chances are you're going to be on the extreme end. But the reality is we have so many combinations, right? You can have another combination like that. Or another combination like that. Each one will land itself somewhere along this range. And mind you, I'm only giving you 3 genes. In reality, to govern height, there's a lot more other genes that will govern it. Other than blood, you probably also need a better eye coordination so that you can know how to walk when you're so tall. You probably also need somewhere in your brain to help you balance better. Right? Many genes. So, when you look at continuous variation, many genes will govern just a single trait. But for this continuation, just a single one, or just maybe 1 or 2 genes will govern the entire trait of blood type. Okay? So that's one thing to take note. Second thing to take note of, continuous variation is often affected by the environment. For example, you look at height, honestly, if you do not eat enough, chances are your bones will even become strong. You don't eat enough protein, you don't grow enough muscle, you won't hit your full potential. A lot of continuous variation is governed by the environment also, it's affected by that. IQ, you don't study enough, you lazy, also not going to hit your maximum. Okay? So, genetically speaking, we may have our potential, but if we don't have the right environment to bring out the potential, you also won't hit that potential. It also contributes to the variation. Okay? So, with that in mind, we try the practice makes progress, this very short MCQ. What do you think when you look at mouse, they have blood group, they also have length of tail. So it is human, human with blood groups. Rats, they have different tail lengths. It's a continuous or discontinuous variation or both. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is like all bar graph is all curves? Or is it like got some instances?
Okay, let me write your question down. Is it all bar graph? I come to it after we address this question. Okay. Let's look at the answer. So what type of variation is showing each population? So you look at the graph. Here you find blood group. Okay, blood group is said so many times until you know it's discontinuous. So I think the real question here is for length of tail. Short and long. Discontinuous or continuous? The key here again lies in the graph that you see. Observe that there are only 2 categories. You're either short or long. There isn't a continuum, a continuous variation of tail length. There isn't an extreme short, extreme long, and then there's an in between. So actually, this one also falls under discontinuous. The best answer for this question, both of them are discontinuous. Which then begs the question, how you answer, therefore, can I just assume that as long as I see histograms, bar charts, I can say that it's going to be discontinuous? I would say most of the time, yes. Okay, if you were to see bar graphs that have very distinct categories, discontinuous. However, you've got to refer to your notes. Your notes on one of the pages shows you something a little odd. you see both bar graphs as well as kind of like a curve. Let's see if you can find it. Okay. What's the notes called? Inheritance. Okay, if you scroll down to your notes, somewhere at the very end, you'll find something like that. Here, we find a curve. But if you look at this, what we are trying to show you is that this curve is actually drawn after we drew the bar charts. Yeah? So you look, actually here, we are making use of bar charts. Except that there are so many bar charts. Because there are so many categories. If you find that there are many categories, this exhibits continuous variation. Are you okay? Yeah? But then you look at the very top. Here you find that we consider this as discontinuous. There is dwarf, there is tall for plants. Yet you find that for dwarf, there is still a range here. Yet for tall, you find that there's still a range. You see? Okay, so why is this still considered discontinuous? Because we still find that broadly speaking, there are two categories. It is still short or tall. Then you may be asking, does that mean that within dwarf and tall, there is still continuous variation? Okay, but you observe, here the variation is not as broad as here. The variation here is actually very small. Okay, chances are the reason why it's this way is because perhaps even though shortness has a fixed height, the environment also affected the plant growth. For example, maybe this plant was not watered enough, couldn't reach its full potential. Perhaps it didn't get enough nutrients, the seed didn't land in the correct place. So it can also affect the height. But we see that the variation is not as wide because there's actually a particular height it's supposed to achieve. Okay? Okay. But we still see two distinct categories. Yes?
So in the exam, we assume that they're all in the same condition.
Okay, say again. In the exam,
We assume that all of the, let's say the plants, right? We assume that they all grow under the same condition.
You could assume so. Yeah. But each plant will still be slightly different, get slightly different nutrients. It also could be an effect of how the person collects the data. Then you see this variation coming up. But we still see two distinct categories, so we can still consider this continuous. Okay. This last segment is just very fast enough. Okay, then we are done. So, any questions from you? If not, we will start the next chapter. We have to go a little bit faster because week 10, which is the week after, we won't see each other at all. Yeah. So next week we only have 2 more lessons. Any questions? No? Right, then we're going to go into our very last chapter of the bio. Okay, could everyone go to natural selection? Whatever you've learned is still relatable to this new chapter. I like this chapter. It is appropriately made to be the last chapter because it requires knowledge from all of your biology life. It will also give you a new perspective of how things came to be from a biological evolutionary standpoint. So just to lay the groundwork up, I'm here to present the scientific perspective of how all organisms came to be. Yeah, all their characteristics, how we end up looking the way we are, why certain birds and certain bee plants, so on and so forth. Okay, so this chapter is called Natural Selection and Artificial Selection. We close out this chapter because it helps us understand why things came to be. So far, we've been studying about genes and inheritance. We've been solving puzzles. How do we inherit genes? How do we inherit alleles? How does it affect our phenotype? Okay, to start off this chapter, let's look at the learning objectives first. You are expected to be able to explain the role of natural selection as a possible mechanism for evolution. Okay? Evolution is a rather big word, because when we look at the word evolution, we have our own understanding of evolution already. For example, if I were to type in evolution into Google, very likely you'll find that classic image of this monkey walking after become human, right? Okay, evolution. See, always what? They always like to show this image. This image is probably the worst image to represent evolution. It implies that monkeys became human. Okay? But if you really understand what evolution is, this picture is actually sends a lot of misconceptions. Monkey did not become human. What would be more accurate to say is that that our ancestors looked something like an ape, but modern day monkey did not become humans. Yeah? So there's a slight difference. But another thing that may pop into your mind when you look at evolution is you look at Pokemon. Alright? Because in Pokemon, you always say, oh, one Pokemon can evolve to another. So for example, if you look at this one over here. Sorry, I'm assuming you all know your Pokemon. Okay, some of you don't know Pokemon. Okay, but if you look at Pokemon, they often show one will become this, another one will become that. Okay? And you'll say that is evolution. That's also not evolution. You know what that's more like? That is more like, oh, that's not upgrading. That is more this thing, metamorphosis. That is more like a caterpillar becoming a pupa, becoming a butterfly. Yeah, there are Pokemon like that. So, but to say that this is evolution is not correct. Individuals cannot evolve. You cannot evolve. Okay? You cannot evolve, this caterpillar cannot evolve. What this caterpillar is going through is a change of its body, its metamorphosis. So what in the world is evolution? Okay? Reality is evolution, you cannot see evolution taking place before your very eyes. You cannot evolve. Evolution requires millions of years to happen. So this is the context that we will set in place as we try to make sense of evolution. And we're going to study one possible mechanism for evolution. And the possible mechanism is called natural selection. Natural selection leads to us evolving as a population. Okay. Your skill to pick up is this. At the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify some environmental factors that can affect natural selection. You also should be able to identify what kind of variation that confers in organisms. Okay. You should be able to identify what kind of traits offers a selective advantage. All these words will make sense as we go through the lesson. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to watch a video of a case study. I expect you to understand this case study. Helps us understand evolution on the long-term scale. Before we begin, let's look at these three questions. Okay, help me nudge your friends that are halfway to the other world already. Okay, so let's begin. Before we watch this video, I'd like you to look at these three questions. Have this in mind as we watch the video. First question, what kind of variation does the phenotype of fur color exhibit? We're going to watch a video about a particular kind of mouse. Okay, I want you to pay attention. What type of variation does it exhibit? Continuous, discontinuous. Second, what is the cause of the variation? Third, is dark fur color good or bad? Okay? Let's watch this video, and I'd like you to answer these three questions in a while. Type in your answer into what you call this pool. Okay? Type in your answer 1, 2, and 3 as we go along. So everyone should be on your iPads ready to type down your responses as we watch the video. Okay, all ready? Okay, let's Watch this video.
Across the American Southwest, golden deserts dotted by cacti and brush stretch for miles. Yet here in Mexico's Valley of Fire, the landscape changes dramatically. Patches of black rock interrupt the scene, remnants of volcanic eruptions that occurred about 1,000 years ago. The eruption spewed a river of lava more than 40 miles long across the desert. As the molten rock cooled, it darkened, leaving any creature dependent on camouflage in serious trouble. In the complex battle of life, one of the constant struggles between seeing and not being seen, evolutionary game of hide and seek. And we've come here to the Valley of Fire in New Mexico, a battlefield, to find one of the tiniest soldiers and what it can teach us about our adventure games. On the desert sands, the rock pocket mouse blends in perfectly, its light-colored fur concealing it from predators. On a dark lava, the same fur makes the mouse stand out, attracting the many creatures that see it as food.
These mice are the Snickers bar of the desert. They're eaten by foxes and coyotes and rattlesnakes and certainly by owls and maybe even occasional hawks. And most of those predators are visual predators.
So what happened to the pocket mice that found themselves on this new terrain? When I accompany biologist Michael Nachman onto the lava, it doesn't take long to find out. Nachman has been collecting mice, unharmed in tracks.
And it's a dark one.
It is.
Now, are most of the ones you find out here dark? Almost always. Not only have the mice here evolved to be as dark as the bush, the color change has occurred precisely where it will conceal them from hunters.
White and too. That's right. All of the dark ones here and on the lava flows have the white and dark ones. There's no selection for dark on the valley because predators are coming just on.
Left to themselves, the mice show no preference for light or dark rocks. It's the predators that have made the difference.
The change in color over evolutionary time of population is driven by predators weeding out the mice that don't match their pattern.
But how did the dark mice arise in the first place?
When a black mouse appears in a light population of mice, that is usually going to be due to a mutation. And those are random and rare events.
To fully understand the pocket mouse transformation, Nachman moves from the lava to the lab. He and his team extract DNA from light and dark mice taken from one desert region. The aim? Find one or more genetic mutations that cause dark coloration. A mutation is a change in the chemical letters that make up our genes. It's a copying error, and they occur when our cells divide. Mutation seems to mean something bad is happening. Mutations are neither good or bad, whether they are favored or whether they are rejected or whether they're just neutral. Depends upon the conditions and where it finds itself. So for the pocket mouse, a mutation that causes the mouse to turn black, that is good if they're living on black rock, and it's bad if you're living out in the sandy desert.
White mice are all underwater.
Fur color is a trait controlled by many genes. To figure out how dark mice evolve, Nachman focuses on how these genes differ in dark and light mice. One by one, the genes prove identical, but at last, something does turn up. The difference between dark and light mice boils down to a difference those mice that aren't black have enough advantage that their babies do better, and they have more offspring, their offspring have more offspring. And just about a 5% advantage compounded year in and year out can very quickly turn the whole population black, as we see. If dark color gives mice a 1% competitive advantage, and you start with 1% of the population being dark, in about 1,000 years, 95% of the mice will be dark. If instead, the dark color gives them a 10% advantage, then it only takes 100 years. Thanks to Nachman's mice, science has an example of evolution crystal clear in every detail.
Okay, I need you to fill in your views. 1, 2, and 3. What type of variation do they exhibit? What caused the variation? Is dark fur good or bad? So done typing, we'll look at your friend's responses. You write the script. Okay. I'm going to tease out some of our responses. So, Pao Yang was one of the first to respond. He says, fur color becomes darker. Okay, I think the first question was, what type of variation does phenotype of fur color exhibit? So I'm asking you, between discontinuous and continuous, what kind of variation do you observe when you look at fur color? Between the two. Okay, Zuni says it's a discontinuous variation. Yeah, it was either black or white. Okay, there's no range of fur color in between. And Kyra kind of shows us that it's either light or dark. Only two options. So it's a discontinuous variation. Okay, and Ella kind of bridges both together. Discontinuous, light or dark. Second one, what is the cause of the variation? What caused this variation to begin with? Why was it even black? Okay, some of us, okay, so we see a few variations in answer. First one is, the ground became dark because of the lava. Then, because the mice need to camouflage, therefore we observe this variation occur. Volcanic eruption caused the terrain to be covered by the lava. White mouse stood out. The predators resulted in the mouse evolving to become dark colored. Okay, mutation in the gene mutation. Okay, so we see two variations in our answer. answer. Our answers exhibit this continuous variation. Okay, so why? Which one is more accurate? Okay, I have to say up front, if I ask you what caused this variation to begin with, why do we observe that there are some mice that are black, some that are white? The cause is not the environment. Okay? The cause of variation is not the environment. I say again, the cause of variation is not the environment. The cause is mutation. What does the environment do? The environment changes the proportion of this variation. Okay? So the environment changes the proportion of traits in the population. The environment does not cause dark fur to occur. Okay? Say again, the environment did not cause this to suddenly spontaneously appear. Correct? How did this suddenly spontaneously occur? It's because of mutation. Somewhere along the way, as DNA was dividing, mutation occurred. And then it resulted in a dark fur. But over time, I agree, after the volcano erupted, this whole land changed color. Over generations, we find more and more of this mutated allele spreading across the population. Yes?
How does the allele know,
Whether it is?
like,
Say again.
if the gun is back, right, how does the black allele know, like, oh,
Fair enough, okay. So, who is asking, hey, okay, then my response is, which one came first? Did the volcano erupt? Then after that, this particular allele mutated, become black? Okay, it's not the case, everything happened by chance. So what does this mean? It means to say, before this volcano even erupted, actually, all of us will have mutations. All of us have mutations, just like the mice. It means to say, some of the mice may have had a mutation that resulted in their ears becoming really big. Some of them may have had a mutation that resulted in, what should I change? Their eyes becoming really big. Okay? So my response to Hao Yang is this. Actually, there were lots of mutations in the population. However, because when the volcano erupted, out of all the mutations, this one just nice made sense. Just nice this one had an advantage. Had a selective advantage. So this is vocabulary I expect you to know. Selective advantage. This is a vocabulary you need to know. The rest of them, neutral. These mutations are neutral, had no advantage. Okay? So thanks for bringing the question up, because a lot of students think, and a lot of lay people think that because the volcano erupted, the mind thinks to itself, what, better change, so it thinks very hard, then the genes mutate across and then it turns black. That is not possible. If it were the case, right, we can solve a lot of problems that we face, right? If it's a hot day, I'm going to mutate myself on the spot so that I have more sweat glands. But we don't do that, right? But if by chance, I just nice have more sweat glands, right, I'm going to have a better chance of survival in a hot environment. And then I can find a mate. Then we have babies. Then my baby will have a lot of sweat pores also. Okay? So it's by chance.
then like, it's by chance that the ground was darker. What if the ground became like too dark?
Okay, so Hao Yang asked, Hao Yang, even though your question sounds a bit wacky, it's a good context. Hao Yang asked, hey, then what if it's not volcano erupt? Okay? Okay, you say blue, blue is a bit far-fetched. Can you choose another color? White, maybe white. Okay. So let's say there's an industry set up nearby, a factory set up nearby, sell a lot of smoke. Hey, why are things so hard? Snow. Okay, ice age. Suddenly it's snow, right? Then the whole land all become very whitish. Fair enough? So this mutation here, is it still conferring a selective advantage? No advantage, right? But for the mice that had the original allele that is already quite fur, good for them. Then I would say now the white fur allele, now the white fur allele has the selective advantage.
Brown.
Oh yes, it was brown at first.
The other one.
Oh, so, okay, sorry, brown. So let's say in a population we have a mice that is white color, mutated to be white. Then this white one will have the advantage. Okay, so whether a mutation is good or bad, it's not down to the mutation. You know what it's down to? The environment. Whether mutation is good or bad depends on the environment. The environment is the one that deciding whether this mutation is good or bad. Make sense? Because as Hoya just really brought up, if there is volcanic eruption, this mutation suddenly has an advantage. But if it snows, then another mutation will have an advantage. And the black allele suddenly has no advantage anymore. Follow it? So we look at our friend's responses. Is dark fur color good or bad? The reality is that it really depends. So it is good in the black terrain, but bad in light sandy environments. All mutations is really a good or bad really determined by the environment. So dark fur is good on dark land, bad on sandy land. By season. Mutations, we cannot say it's good or bad. It really is dependent on what environment you are in. Okay? For now, you look at our blood types A, B, O, and AB. There actually is an advantage whether we have any of the blood types. But if there is an advantage, you will find that our population will start to have more and more and more of an allele present. Because we keep passing on to the next gen. Those that have no advantage will just die and not pass it on to the next generation. Now, if I look at a question. You have a question, okay? So in the context of these mice, let's go back to the mice. This was a real storyline. I'm going to leave the other mice present, those with the big ear mutation, big eye mutation. Okay? Let's look at the real story. The story went something like that. After the volcano erupted, suddenly the mice with the mutation for black fur has a selective advantage. This is a good thing because this means you have a higher chance of survival. Because in that region you also have predators waiting to, this is a eagle bee, okay? These predators waiting to look out for prey. It's very easy to spot these prey now, so it's going to eat this. Okay, going to eat this one also. Going to eat this one also. By chance, very few of them are going to survive. But this one is going to have a selective advantage. It's going to survive. If it manages to survive, very likely they can mate, and they're going to have more babies. Yeah? And you'll find that second generation, I'm going to find more babies with dark fur. Granted, I'm still going to have some babies with the original colored fur, but you'll find the next generation, a lot more of them have the dark fur. If, again, the ground is still black, eagle goes on to eat more of the mice with light colored fur, you'll find that in the next generation, if they mate, you'll find more and more of the mice with the dark fur. This is what we refer to as evolution. You look at the population now versus the population at the very beginning, the proportion of the alleles has changed. That's what evolution is. Evolution is the change in proportion of alleles over many generations. Therefore, you cannot evolve. The image of the monkey becoming a human doesn't make sense. Monkeys cannot become humans in one generation. It requires many, many generations for an ancestor that looked like a monkey to evolve to what of its current state. We call this process natural selection because what is the natural part? The environment. The environment is naturally selecting for certain traits. So natural selection, natural relates to the environment. Selection because every generation we select for the traits that have a selective advantage. Okay? This generation we select for the trait that is black. Then it survives the next generation and so on and so forth. So there are a few vocabulary I expect you to be able to use when you describe natural selection. Number one, selective advantage. Can you tell me what is the selective advantage? Second word that I need you to be able to use is selection pressure. Look at this context here. Who is providing the pressure? What is the selection pressure? That if I didn't have this selection pressure, you won't observe the population change over time. Yeah, but which part of the environment? Can you pinpoint what is the selection pressure? Okay. Elaborate a little bit more. Okay, fair enough, but in this context, in this storyline, what is the selection pressure here? The bird, agree? It is the eagle, right? I take away the eagle, right? Actually, whether you dark fur or light fur makes no use, correct? Only because the eagle exists that this has an advantage. But if there's no eagle, honestly, after the volcano erupt, whether you light fur or dark fur makes no difference to your survival. So the skill to pick up here is you must be able to identify what the pressure is. The pressure in this case is the eagle. Last but not least, actually these two terms are the most important. You must be able to spot what is the trait giving a selective advantage, what in the environment is giving the pressure. Okay? I'd like you now to try. Go to this simulation, go to part 2, click on this particular simulation. I found a simulation that tries to simulate that story that we just listened to. Here, you see a lot of circles. The circles represent the mice. You see currently this land that is sandy, lots of mice with brown fur, very few with black fur. Then you see occasionally one big circle coming down, that's the eagle, coming in, swooping in to grab mice. Okay? I would like you to drag. Go and change the environment. See what happens to the population over time. See how it evolves because of natural selection. Go and try. That took many generations. It's not like it was instant. It took many generations of mice reproducing. Those that have better advantage to survive, they go to the next generation. Now we find it's almost a flip. If I put it in between, how would that affect? Okay. I'm just going to flip it the other way. So can a mutation go from being good to bad? Can, if the environment changes. I'd like to summarize some common misconceptions people often have about evolution. First one is individuals cannot evolve. wrong. The correct one is populations can evolve. Populations evolve over many generations. You must remember that if individuals could evolve, our life would be very simple. We will always evolve to any problem we face in the environment. Second misconception is that students often say that natural selection causes variation. This is wrong. What truly causes the variation? Mutation. Mutation is what causes variation. If there's no mutation, we'll all be the same. What does this imply? It implies that actually that variation is needed for natural selection to occur. Agree? If we are all the same, the environment has nothing to select for. Okay? Variation is needed for natural selection to occur. If there's no difference in the population, the environment has nothing to select for. Everyone has equal chance of survival. So these are the two biggest misconceptions students have. They think individuals can evolve. That's not true. Or they think natural selection caused the mutation, or caused the variation. That's not true. Natural selection instead, what does natural selection do? Natural selection changes the proportion of alleles in a population. Yes.
Or like changes in an individual's body over time because they keep using.
Okay. If, for example, I keep going to the sun, then my body, my skin cells mutate, I get skin cancer. That's not evolution. Okay? What is that called? That's just a mutation. Yeah? And will I pass this mutation on to the next generation? Actually, I won't. Because only my skin cells are affected. Unless the testicles, the sperm cells produced are affected, it will not pass on to the next generation. It will be quite terrible. Can you imagine you all had a very bad day, you decide I want to shave my head bald. Then your next generation of kids end up bald also. Right? But it doesn't work that way. What you change as an individual won't affect your baby. You tattoo a heart over here of your ex-girlfriend, whatever your babies come out with one ex-girlfriend name on the left arm, so very terrible.
It's so like if you're genetically very not good at something, but then you train so hard that you're very good, then your children will still be like good.
Yes. Okay. So Yang says the unfortunate truth is, if in the reality, actually you're genetically not predisposed to be able to do something, your child will also have to work very hard to reach where you are. Thinking about the future. Okay, that's all. Now, this is just what we are not done.